Welcome to This Week in High School Sports. Teresa Whipple here with Steve Willits.
Teresa, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. We had girls and boys in action this week in tournaments and some interesting storylines that you're going to talk to us about.
Interesting storylines indeed. It was, in fact, holiday tournament time for basketball. The Lynnwood girls went down to California. They played in the West Coast Jamboree, which is the premier tournament in the nation. It's 128 teams, 16 different divisions, playing at 9 different locations. Lynnwood was put into the Platinum Division, which is kind of the premier division, if you will. And a little interesting in that Lynnwood goes down there to play in this 8-team division, and it's a true tournament. So they're going to play 3 games, trying to get to a championship game and to win it. They get down to the tournament, and they find out that the championship game is a little bit later in the day than they originally anticipated. The championship game was scheduled to be played when they were heading back to Seattle. So rather than trying to shuffle things around a little bit, the tournament officials decided to put them into the consolation bracket of their tournament. So they didn't have a chance to win a championship down there. Having said that, this is still 8 of the premier teams on the West Coast, so there are no easy games. And Lynnwood found that out quickly, but Lynnwood also is Lynnwood, and they did what they've been doing all season long. They picked up 3 very nice wins over teams with a lot of talent, in most cases Division I college recruits. They won 3 games. They beat Sacred Heart Cathedral by 29 points. Michaela Pivic, 27 points and 14 rebounds in that game. They beat Oaks Christian the next day, 73-50. The thing I like about this game is that Max Preps currently has Bellevue ranked as the 18th ranked team in the nation. They have Lynnwood 19. They're the only 2 teams in the state of Washington ranked in their top 25. Bellevue beat the same Oaks Christian team by 5 just a few nights earlier. Lynnwood beat them by 23, and they had a 34-13 lead at halftime. So I'm just saying, I don't do the rankings, but if I'm you guys, Max Preps, maybe give Lynnwood a little more consideration. I might be a little biased, but
You heard it here first.
there you go. And then the very next day, they turned around and they beat Celestian Prep 85-71. And again, Celestian Prep has Minion Moore, who is going to USC next year. Oaks Christian has, I think it's Katie Campbell. She's going to go play at Washington State University next year. She also had 7 3-pointers in the game against Lynnwood, which makes their 23-point victory that much more impressive. So these are 3 very good teams, and Lynnwood took care of business and then some. Michaela Pivic was outstanding all tournament long. She has a final game of 33 points, 24 rebounds, and 7 assists.
Incredible.
That's for one game. That's not for the entire tournament. Caprice Boston has over 15 points in each game. Kelsey Rogers had a big tournament. Riley Walsh played well. And Jordan Edwards was named one of the all-tournament players. She had 8 steals in a game. So a great tournament for the Royals, regardless as to whether or not the tournament enabled them to have a chance to win a trophy. They came back with 3 victories.
Okay. And the girls were, on our other teams, were also in action. What happened there?
They were. It was not a tournament week for them, but they still had games nonetheless. Meadowdale gets a nice 47-22 victory over Cascade. Eva Taylor comes out, hits 2 3-pointers to start that game off. Grace Wilson and Selena Teckel each had double figures for the Mavericks, so a nice win for them. Mountlake Terrace, they lose to Everett, but they got off to a great start in that game. Nohea Morrison, the freshman for the Hawks, she gets her first start ever, and all she does is goes out and leads the team in scoring with 11 points. So the future continues to be bright for them. And then Edmonds-Woodway picked up another victory. They beat a good Kamiak team, which takes the Warriors' record to 8-2 on the season.
Very good. Okay. And what about the boys? We had some tournament action, and you and I were both there.
We were, and that's another little interesting tidbit, or interesting storyline. The Mountlake Terrace Hawks were to play in an 8-team tournament in their own building. They were supposed to play Canyon Springs out of Nevada in game number 1. They find out a week before the game that Canyon Springs is not going to come to the tournament. They left Mountlake Terrace a voicemail saying that they didn't have the funds to get up to Seattle. They weren't able to raise enough money. They had some problems back at home, and sorry, but we're not going to play this year. So Mountlake Terrace had to take a bye on that first game because they couldn't find a replacement opponent. Interesting side note, Canyon Springs ended up in Seattle anyway. They ended up playing in Franklin's tournament. So why they left the voicemail, which I've actually listened to, so I know it exists, saying they weren't able to afford to get up to Seattle when they, in fact, were boarding planes to come to Seattle that same week, I don't know, but nonetheless, Mountlake Terrace had to sit out that first game of the tournament. They technically had a bye, I guess, and that therefore they got to play West Seattle on day number 2. And this was the game of the tournament.
It was a great game.
It was a great game indeed. West Seattle's ranked number 6th in the state. They are undefeated, or were undefeated coming into this game. They jumped out to an 8-point lead in the third quarter, and the Hawks came storming back. They got the 49-43 victory. They did a great job of holding Nate Pryor, who is Seattle University prospect, who's going to be committing to play basketball there. Held him to 12 points, which is below his average. One fascinating storyline in this game, Derek Anima led the Hawks in scoring. He had 20 points, 18 of which in the second half. And right before halftime, he lost his contact lens on the court. So he played the entire second half with only one contact, and he scored 18 points. So perhaps Derek should start playing with one eye more often. But he mentioned that his vision was a little bit fuzzy, and he still went out there and had just a great game and helped lead his team to victory. And that's a huge win for the Hawks as they move back into Wesco play this week.
Yeah. And I think we did have a photo, didn't we?
We do, yeah. There's a photo right there of Kyrie Armstead, who got off to a nice start in that game as well. I think he had the first 6 points of the game. Okay. There he is playing up against the Wildcats right there. So a great job by the Hawks. And also want to give a shout out to Marysville Pilchuck. They were willing to work with the Hawks in restructuring some of their schedule to play a Saturday makeup game so that Mountlake Terrace and Marysville Pilchuck could both get 2 games into this tournament. And they played on Saturday, a game that the Hawks fell behind by 10 in the first half and came back and won 56-46.
Okay. And Edmonds-Woodway, they had 2 really strong games.
2 very strong games. They defeated Battleground and Snohomish on the 2 days of the tournament. The Snohomish game in particular, and I think we have a photo right there of David Woodard in action. The Snohomish game, they jumped out to a huge lead early and just ran away. It was 19-4 in the first quarter. I think it was 43-17 at halftime. They go on to a 74-31 victory over a Snohomish team that's very storied and coached by Len Bone, one of the great coaches in the region. Huge win for them. The Warriors just keep looking stronger and stronger. They're now at 8-2 on the season as they get ready to also go back into Wesco play. So they don't seem to be slowing down one bit and showing other opponents around the region that they're for real.
Okay. And Meadowdale played as well, even though they weren't in a tournament, right?
Meadowdale played Ingram, a fantastic finish in their game. They trailed almost the entire game. Final play of the game, it's a tie game. They inbound the ball underneath the hoop. Lee Bremer, their senior point guard, gets stuck in the corner. I was talking to their coach, Roger O'Neill, about it. Roger said he thought about calling a timeout at that point, but he trusted in his senior point guard. Bremer drives the hoop, draws the defense in. Drew Tingstead very wisely cuts towards the basket, and Bremer found him cutting towards the hoop. Tingstead lays it up at the buzzer, and they beat Ingram 54-52. So a great game for them. And also the Royals were in action this week, too. And I want to mention them real quick. They played in the Mountlake Terrace tournament. Came up empty. They didn't get any victories, but still, nonetheless, a good showing by them. Bryce Milne had double figures in both games. I know they jumped out to an early lead on Snohomish. Ryan Rapanen had 8 points in that game, or in the half. So the Royals continue to get better. They continue to work, and we'll see what they do the second half of the season.
Okay. Anything else before we go on to what's coming up this week?
I think that's it. We've covered it all.
Very good. So we'll be broadcasting 2 games through the Sound Live Sports Network, and Steve's going to be doing the play-by-play for both games, right? Talk a little bit about who's coming up.
Yeah, Tuesday we've got Mountlake Terrace versus Glacier Peak. That game's at Glacier Peak, 7:15 start time. And then on Friday night, Mountlake Terrace versus Shorecrest. That game will be at MTHS. Also a 7:15 start. And really, for the Hawks, they're currently holding on to that first place lead, but it's a very slim margin. And those are 2 of the top tier teams of that division. So for them to kind of keep it going and to stay ahead of Edmonds-Woodway, they need victories in those 2 games. So it should be a fun week, and it should be 2 very good basketball games. One other thing I want to mention before we sign off, too, the Edmonds-Woodway girls. They have 2 games this week. Both home games, but they are about as tough as you can get. They play Arlington on Wednesday, and then they play Lynnwood on Friday. Both of those teams undefeated so far this year. Both are top 5 teams in the state. So we're going to find out very quickly if the Warriors belong on that upper echelon with some of the great teams.
Yeah, they have a tough week ahead, and we wish all our teams luck. And thanks for joining us, and we'll be back again next week. Steve, have a great week.
Thanks, Teresa. You too.